Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, where you transform how you communicate to create the life and relationships you truly want. I'm your host, Alejandra Siroca, and I help multicultural individuals, couples, and change makers move beyond surface level politeness and conflict avoidance to have authentic, value-based interactions that actually resolve issues and deepen connection. If you are tired of rehashing conversations in your head, walking on eggshells, or feeling misunderstood in your most important relationships, this podcast will give you a new way forward. And if you've been thinking about getting support with your communication, visit languagealchemy.com to find out which transformative communication program is most beneficial for you. Our world is more mobile and diverse than ever before. We have more contact with people who may be speaking the same language as us, but with a beautiful variety of accents. And yet, there is a persistent and harmful myth I want to address here. And that is the false belief that people with what's called the quote-unquote thick accent are somehow less intelligent or less capable. Today's conversation is about mutual understanding and mutual adaptation. We are going to talk about why is it that people seek accent modification? And just as importantly, what can those of us who are native speakers of a language, whether we speak with a regional accent or what's considered a standard accent, can do to better understand and connect with people who speak our language with a different accent or with a foreign accent? To explore these questions, I've invited someone very special to me. Natalie Cohen is not only an expert in the field, but she is also one of my most beloved friends. We've known each other for about 25 years, and I think 3 of those we lived together in Boston as roommates. Natalie is a licensed speech language pathologist with over 25 years of clinical experience. She spent 15 years supporting school-age children in Massachusetts and California schools before establishing her private practice in Lexington, Massachusetts 12 years ago. And 7 years ago, she expanded her expertise to include accent modification coaching and now serves clients worldwide through individualized coaching and online courses for non-native English speakers. Natalie, welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast. I'm so happy and so grateful to have you here.
And thank you so much, Alejandra. It means so much to be here with you. You're such a wonderful person and you have so much to share. And I'm so appreciative of being able to talk with you here.
Oh, thank you. And for people who don't know how we prepare for the podcast and we were setting intentions, we both said to each other, thank you for being such a wonderful friend. You've been such a wonderful, beloved friend for me all these years. So thank you.
Ditto.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm so happy to have this conversation with you, which, by the way, let's tell people it started on the phone a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
When we started talking about understanding and tolerance and the work we were both doing. And then I said, we should do a podcast episode on this. And so starting from something personal, I want you to tell us what drew you to this work. Was there a particular moment or experience or something over the years that made you think, it's important to help people with accent modification, accent work? Why did you decide to do that?
So the fun thing is that I wasn't aware of why I went into it. After working in speech therapy for so many years, I went to a conference and there was a speech therapist giving a talk about how speech therapists were the most qualified people to do accent modification. And I thought, oh my God, I want to do this. This went to think about why did I decide to go into this? And I started looking back at my life and how I've always naturally gravitated towards people who come from other countries. as you know, my dating history, we used to joke around how I dated every continent almost. But most of my good friends have always been from other countries. And I think that has to do with the fact that being Jewish, both sides of my family had to flee Europe, either because of pogroms and in Russia or because of the Nazis, and how that always kind of was very much a part of my life of how my family had to come here. My grandparents had strong German accents, and I used to love imitating them. But in general, I think I've always just kind of felt a real connection to people who come from other countries and loved learning about them. I've always wanted to be in a helping field. I think I gravitated towards helping people from other countries, given the fact that I just naturally feel like I like to connect with people from other countries.
So much so that you married someone who was born in another country.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. However, he's been here since he was 4, so he can't really tell. But yeah, definitely dealing with his family. Very aware. Yes.
That's right. Russian American. Yes. For people who may not know, what is accent modification? How is it different from what people might think as traditional speech therapy?
Our titles are called speech language pathologists. So that, to have that word pathologist in our name means something is wrong with you, which is not true all the time. Truly, speech and language is anything that has to do with speech, has to do with language, has to do with social skills, etc. It's such a huge field. It can work with newborn babies to people who have had strokes. So it's real range. When we're talking about accent modification, we're helping the person work on their intelligibility and their confidence when they're speaking whatever language they want to have. So in our situation, we'll talk about American English. And so we're working on things like pronunciation, intonation patterns, stress patterns, and rhythm patterns of what we have in English. It's really working on intelligibility and speaking with confidence while still preserving the person's identity and cultural background. Because in no way or form is this about eliminating someone's accent to make them sound completely like an American.
You have helped me so much to reduce my accent. And many times you've called me and you said, I heard you say this word. Do you want to learn how to say it differently?
Yeah.
And like the word sabotage, remember?
Yes. Yeah. So actually, I'm curious, Alejandra. So back when we became roommates, one of the first things after you moved in with me was you said, if I say something wrong, correct me. Why did you want that feedback?
I still want to be corrected. I say the same thing to Matthew or other friends and students. If I say something incorrectly, please correct me. And what I mean by that, I think it's more grammatical, but sometimes it's also in terms of my accent and my pronunciation, because I want to be able to connect with people. Connection is so important to me that when in the language, in this case, when I'm speaking English, and there is that moment of, I can see it on the other person's face of, huh? What do you mean? And there's that moment of disconnection. I want to be able to smooth those instances or reduce the number of instances so that our connection is stronger.
Right.
And I guess it's also so that others see that I am just like them, that I'm no different. I am another human being with the same needs, dreams, feelings, and wishes like anybody else.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so many of my clients who come to me, they don't want to feel judged. They feel self-conscious. They feel like, that people aren't really listening to them. Yeah.
Yes. And When they come to you and they tell you, oh, others are not listening to me, how do they feel?
They feel very insecure. I had a client, beautiful, successful woman who was originally from Syria. She is a doctor. And she said that when she first came to the US, she was giving speeches and things like that, and she felt really good. And then she had a supervisor who told her that her accent was getting in the way. And as a result, she became so self-conscious that she got to the point where if she wasn't at work, she avoided speaking English. She went to a store, she would avoid speaking it. If she went to a restaurant, she would say as little as possible because she became so self-conscious of how she sounded. And, so one of the things a lot of times I'm working with people is also on that piece of saying, there's nothing wrong with having an accent. Being able to accept themselves as having an accent and how beautiful it is and how it's part of a person's identity is to have an accent. If we take away everyone's accent, we're all going to sound the same. It takes away someone's individuality.
Yeah, I can completely relate to your client. Sometimes when I meet people for the first time, I am so conscious of how I even say hello. And instead of saying yes, I may say, yeah, to be able to sound more American, to connect more after having done a lot of work with confidence within myself. When I'm teaching workshops, like many people who are listening have come to my workshops, and I would say, English is my second language. My accent is from Argentina, the Caribbean, and a variety of other places, and we all have an accent. I just put that up front because it's natural, it's true, and it's part of who I am. But in the past, I was super conscious about my accent. For people who may not understand, what is accent? Because let's face it, every single person has an accent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. There is no such thing as being accentless. For the most part, I speak with general or what's called either general or standard American English, but it's still an accent because accents are based on where you're from, your culture, your social norms, and your native language. Have what we'll call a foreign accent. It's that you're speaking this new language, but you have the pronunciation, stress, rhythm, and intonation patterns from your previous language that you're now using to speak this other language. So for instance, I have many clients who come from other countries who don't know all the vowels that we use in English. So they substitute for the vowels they know, or maybe they don't have the TH sound in their language. So they modify and use another sound that's similar to it. When we communicate with each other, only 7% of what we say is based on our words. 38% is based on our pronunciation, our intonation, our rhythm, our pacing, etc. That's how our message is coming across. It's based on kind of things like having to do with our accents.
Absolutely. That's why I usually say, you may say a particular word, but depending on your intonation, your tone of voice, how fast you say it, and what your body language is like, it's going to mean something completely different. It's not the same thing to say Natalie than to say Natalie.
Yes,
and I'm
absolutely.
Saying the same word.
Yeah. And so, for instance, if you come from a language that doesn't use the same intonation patterns, it might be very easily misunderstood. Same with things like talking about body language, nonverbal language. That's actually 55% of how we communicate. And if you use a different nonverbal language skills that come from your own language, whether it's eye contact, your hand gestures, how close or far away you speak to someone, they might very well perceive what you're saying because you're not using the same nonverbal language skills that they're using.
Exactly. Yes. And, as a language teacher myself, for example, in going back to the conversation of the vowel sounds, in Spanish, we have 5 vowel sounds.
Right.
But in English, we have 13 vowel sounds.
Right. Exactly.
And so sometimes when I need to say 2 words that they're close to each other and one has a long and the other one a short I have to say it 3 times in my mind before I can say it out loud.
The one that I hear the most of it from clients is difference between the I sound as in it and the E sound. So saying shit versus sheet.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so it's like a lot of times my clients are coming, I want to make sure I'm saying sheet instead of shit.
Exactly. And as you were talking about, even when you were mentioning your grandparents who had a strong German accent and imitating them and laughing at them, there's an uncomfortable truth that we need to face, which is bias.
Absolutely.
You work from people from all over the world, but even within American English, there's bias towards accents.
Absolutely. When we talk about like regional accents, it's kind of actually dialect, meaning it's based on a smaller region of where you live and also some of the vocabulary that you use as well. But living in Massachusetts, I'm sure you've heard people making fun of the Boston accent. And there's some other ones. There's the New York accent. There's Southern accent. I've met so many people over the years where like I tell them I'm a speech therapist. They say, oh, can you help me with my Boston accent? But there is definitely a perception of a lot of people with these more regional accents or dialect that they're not as intelligent. They're more likely to have blue collar jobs and they're not taken as seriously. There was recently a Jimmy Fallon show where he had Matt Damon and Ben Affleck on, which are from Cambridge, Massachusetts. All 3 of them dressed up as blue collar workers, more like clothing. And they went through all of the towns and cities in Massachusetts, sang them with a Boston accent. Now, they didn't just say, instead of saying Boston, they also did it with a gravelly accent, like they went Boston instead of Somerville, instead of Medford. So again, and it was all about being funny, and there's so many situations of that where we're making fun of people who have regional accent, or we don't take them as seriously. Generally don't think that these people are as intelligent, as qualified. Listen to Dr. Fauci and is brilliant. But if you listen to him, he has a pretty strong New York accent. And probably if you didn't know, he was such an intelligent, bright person because of these biases. We would think that he is not as intelligent and as qualified in his job or his former job.
Yeah, it's so tragic. Or like with the doctor from Syria, your client you were talking about, because there are so many biases toward different foreign accents. What do you think is happening psychologically or socially for us when we hear someone speak with a foreign accent?
There's actually been research into this. For one thing, they have found that people who have foreign accents are less likely to get jobs, get promotions, get leadership roles, or less likely to get housing. It all comes down to the fact that subconsciously, the way our brain processes language. So if you are hearing someone who is not speaking the same as you do, it takes your brain more effort to be able to process and understand what they said. So for instance, if you are speaking with a heavy accent, I'm probably spending more time trying to figure out what you're saying. And so I might be focusing more on the words versus the whole message. And there's actually been studies that have found that if you take someone who has a foreign accent, we'll say, and someone who speaks the same as you, and they say the same thing, the person with the accent, their message will sound less valuable. Think about it. It's the same thing as like if someone mumbles, they speak too quickly, their intonation patterns are different than yours. It doesn't sound right in our brain. And so it's making our brains work harder. And the message gets lost. And so then the person is perceived as not as qualified, not as intelligent, even though that's absolutely not correct. The other thing that they have found is that because of people speak differently than ourselves, we subconsciously think of the person as not in our group. They're in the out group, because they're different than ourselves. And so they're different. And so we put all of these thoughts into that. Think about the Queen's English. That's or French accents. Those are ones that we've actually put positive biases on it. Oh, we hear a British accent. That person must be very bright. They're very proper. And so it's all about how our brains are subconsciously coming up with these biases, whether they're positive or negative.
I think many times we are not aware that we're making judgments about others.
Yeah.
You brought the UK. In the UK, accent is very important. I know several people from the UK who talk about how if they want to get a certain job or at a certain party, they first listen to see what kind of accent is being used, and then they try to imitate that accent, and how important that is to place themselves in the social strata, if you will.
Right. Which is why a lot of people have told me why they've tried to get rid of their regional accents, like a Boston accent, or a Southern accent. Thinking about biases, as you mentioned, how my husband Jane, he's originally from Russia. When I first met my father-in-law, I was so intimidated by him. And it was because of the way he speaks. In Russian, they don't use the same intonation pattern. So, for instance, my invitation of him would be like, Natalie, how are you doing? And he totally means it in a friendly way. But to my ear, it sounds very intimidating, doesn't sound friendly. And it's like how our brain automatically comes up with thinking processes that are not valid. It's just,
if we were able to be more aware of this, and that's why we're doing this episode, and what our conversation on the phone a few weeks ago was about, if we were to bring more awareness when someone speaks with an accent that's not our accent, and to think, oh, this person wants to connect with me and they're transferring all the set of sounds they learned in order to communicate with me right now, and have that positive regard for that other precious human being. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. If we are consciously changing our thinking process, if we are willing to adapt and see that, as you say, here is a person, they say things differently than me, but it doesn't have anything to do with anything about them. And I have so much to learn from this person. I mean, so many beautiful, wonderful people in this world. And just because they sound different than us doesn't mean that they're not people that we will enjoy being with. We can learn from them, appreciate things, so many things that we can learn from them.
Right. Yeah. Or who are perhaps even more intelligent than we are. And like you said, we have so much to learn from.
All the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that when I went to grad school to teach English as a foreign language and have an understanding of language acquisition, one of the things I learned in our phonetic classes was that when you learn a second language, when you're young, you are more likely to, in your mouth, all the muscles in your mouth, they're still pretty flexible. Your tongue, your breathing, the way you aspirate, you work with your teeth. And so you can replicate other sounds, more sounds. But when you learn a second language later on in life, after your tongue is used to moving in a certain way, you're used to breathing in another way, your tongue is used to hitting your teeth or your palate or the bottom of your mouth in specific ways. Like we have tonal languages, like many Asian languages are very tonal, and they use the tongue very differently. They don't have as many hard consonant sounds like in English. That it's much harder for someone to, from the get-go, to be able to adjust easily to the new sounds of the second language, not because of lack of trying, not because of lack of intelligence, but it's just a matter of physiology.
Absolutely. And so a lot of times that's what I'm working on. One of the first things I work on with my client is first identifying what are those sounds that are affecting their intelligibility. And so then it's then teaching them, oh, this is what you need to do with your tongue. This is what you need to do with your lips. This is what you have to do with your jaw. Whether you have to use your vocal cords or not. If we're talking about intonation, oh, okay, let's try working on changing your pitch when you're speaking. It's totally possible to be changed. It's just learning to make those changes. And then, of course, as you're saying, as an adult, it's a lot harder. It takes more time and more practice than when you're younger.
I'm wondering, aside from the technical accent work, what strategies do you teach non-native English speakers, people who have a foreign accent, to help them communicate more clearly, more confidently?
As I said, we work a lot about things on the sounds, and we work a lot about the intonation, pausing. Certain languages don't pause as much as we do. So learning to pause, learning to put stress on words, whether it's within a sentence or within a word. So for instance, I've worked with many people from India. They're less likely to put emphasis on words. So when we say the word development in the US, we put emphasis on vel. Someone from India, my example would be, not that I say perfectly at all, but is development. So it's a lot harder. So working on those sorts of things, the strategies that I tell them that I think are helpful for them when they're not, if you're not working on these sorts of things, are use live captioning when you're giving a presentation, provide transcript. And I love your example of what you said about just telling people from the beginning, I am from Argentina. You're taking away from people being distracted by the fact that they're saying, okay, she has an accent. Where could she possibly be? They know from the fact, oh, she's from Argentina. That makes sense. Okay, now I can listen more to her message. So, and then again, also talking about things like teaching nonverbal language skills sometimes as well. Because if they're standing too close to someone or too far away, not making eye contact, that can be a real issue for someone. I've had people who don't make eye contact, and then there are people at work telling them that people think that they're not listening to them when they speak to them. They think they're rude. They think they know better than other people. So yeah, teaching those sorts of things.
I remember when we were roommates and I was teaching English to my students who were from all over the world. They were all learning English as a second language. The issue of first teaching American teachers, monolingual teachers, that in certain cultures, it is a sign of respect to not make eye contact, especially with adults and with authority. And then at the same time, teaching kids that it's okay to make eye contact with authority and to learn this other way of communicating that maybe, yes, at home and with our grandparents, it was a respectful thing not to make eye contact. And in school, it was a respectful thing to make eye contact. So, and also working with the teachers to understand that when the students weren't making eye contact with them, it was not a sign of, I'm not listening or I'm not respecting you, or I don't want to connect with you.
Right. That just brought up another thought to me is I'm working with someone on their accent and make sure that they're better understood and feel more confident. It doesn't mean that they can't speak the way they do when they're among the people, like among their family members or things like that. There's what we call code switching. It's like you're talking about, if in your culture you don't use eye contact, then you shouldn't be using eye contact when you're dealing with people within your culture. But just be aware when you're speaking to an American that, oh yeah, you need to use eye contact, because that's part of this culture.
Right. Yes. And same thing I'm thinking with monochromatic and polychromatic cultures. So monochromatic cultures, people speak one at a time. They take turns. Someone speaks, the other person listens. Until the other person is finished, you don't chime in. And there are other cultures that are polychromatic cultures where everybody's speaking at the same time and chiming in and contributing, and it's not considered interruption. It's just considered we're connecting. This is part of how we connect and communicate. And so I remember myself coming from Argentina and from Latin America, where if you are with people, you are always talking on top of each other, and that's okay. To in the States, in one-on-one conversations or at a table, in the beginning, I've been here for 30 years now, but in the beginning, literally remembering to bite my tongue, to wait. Okay, It's not your turn yet. It's not your turn yet. And, you can ask my beloved husband when he says, it's not your turn yet. I'm not done.
Yeah. So it's like learning all those cultural differences, Yeah. Those rules, those unsaid rules
that you don't realize you have until you contact people who grew up with another set of rules that are also unspoken.
Exactly. Yeah.
I really enjoy hearing how the way you work with people, other than the technical aspect of it, is also a respectful way, respectful of their identities, of their cultures, or of their individuality, and teaching them how to be more confident in the world and in their lives.
Yeah.
And now I kind of want to flip the script to the other side.
Okay.
And to the native English speakers who, as you were saying, when they are talking to someone who speaks English with a foreign accent and they're making that effort in their brains to try to understand them, what are some things that monolingual English speakers or native English speakers can do to connect in a more mindful, in a more skillful, in a more tolerant way when they're speaking to someone who's using a foreign accent?
Well, I think the biggest thing is being aware that you have these innate biases. And that's the biggest way to break that habit is to say, I'm speaking to Alejandra. It's not that she's not as smart as me. It's just that she speaks differently than me. Oh, and now I can listen to her. Of course, I don't think that at all, but just to use that as an example. So it's like being able to consciously saying, I know that my previous thinking processes is wrong. The other thing I would say is to try and learn about that other person's language. So for instance, if I work with someone and they're from China, I should go online and find out what are the differences in the way they speak. What are they more likely to have trouble pronouncing, or what are the differences? And what are they more likely to substitute for, to help you realize what are those differences? And then you can always listen. Everything is on the online these days. You can go online and say, okay, I want to listen to someone who's speaking English, who native language is Mandarin, and listen to it. And often they will come with transcripts. And so you're training your ear to be able to hear how they speak and to be able to help you better understand it. The other thing I would say is, if you know someone is struggling with a word, especially if it's an important word for them. So for instance, if they're in a particular field of work and they can't say a word. So for instance, that doctor I was telling you about in Syria, she couldn't say the word nurse. I had another doctor who was a rheumatologist who couldn't say arthritis. Those are important words for them to be able to understand. So say, let me help you with that word so you can say it better. People will be so appreciative of your helping that and out with that. Again, when we were talking about how it takes our brains longer to process that, to what they're saying. So not only are you, if you're listening to recordings of people with that type of accent, that makes you more familiar, but also consciously deciding, I'm going to try and listen to the meaning of what they're saying versus just trying to figure out what they're saying word for word. And so that will help you get more what they're saying. Yeah. Other thing you can do is become aware of that culture's nonverbal language skills, for whether it's how they use eye contact, their facial expressions, or things like that. Or as you were talking about, if they have different ways of like people speaking over each other versus one at a time. If you become aware of their cultural differences, that is going to help you to be able to perceive them differently. And also, that person is less likely then to be now considered part of the out group and now part of your in group.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And as you were giving all these recommendations, because I work mainly with couples who come from different backgrounds. Many of them come from different cultures. Many of them are married to an immigrant, or they're a child of immigrant parents. And I teach them how to tolerate one another and have more compassion with one another by understanding the set of rules, the linguistic set of rules of the other person, of their partner, their relatives, their family member. And I do many of those things that you've talked about. But something I haven't done, which I'm going to start doing, is to have them research online how people sound and learn more about the language of their beloveds or their beloveds' families, with the intention of opening the heart, connecting, having more tolerance and more compassion, because we all want to connect and we all want to be able not just to get along, but to live well together.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And just because we sound different doesn't mean that we are different.
Yes. I was thinking of someone who speaks English as a second language. Some things not to do. What do you think about this? Is don't speak louder to a person who speaks English as a foreign language. We can hear you perfectly fine. We do not need more volume. Sometimes we may need a different word, a synonym. Sometimes we may need you to slow down a little bit, but we don't need more volume. And the second thing is we don't need overcorrection, because I find that not so much in myself, but with other friends and other people that I observe, and also my clients who tell me, oh, I'm constantly being corrected. And I know they got what I said, or else why would they correct the pronunciation of this and this and that? And when I say a sentence and they've corrected 3 or 4 words already without asking me for permission, without asking for my consent, then I want to be quiet. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to connect to that person. That person doesn't feel safe to me.
Right. It's interesting. Occasionally I'll get clients who say, I just want to sound like an American. I don't want people to be asking me anymore where I'm from. I just want to sound American. And usually by the time I finish working with them, they don't sound like an American anymore, but they're understandable and their pronunciation is a lot better and more natural. There's ways to say things and be understood without having to sound American. And I think that's wrong. We don't have to sound the same.
As you were saying that, I could actually feel the sadness in my heart, Natalie, because that is the number one question people ask us when either we speak English as a foreign language or when we say our names. I say my name, and immediately when I meet someone new, the question comes, where are you from? And I know it is from a desire to try to place you and see how to connect with you and can we be friends and all that. But sometimes it's so painful to receive it 5 times a day because we're so much more than where we grew up or were raised or the particular accent that we have. And it is so exhausting sometimes to answer that question. I can imagine people who work in customer service, or they need to talk to so many different people because of work on every day, to be asked that question is to hear, you are different from me. You are an other.
Yeah. Just made me think a little about what you were saying. I recently went to a comedy show and the comedian, one of the comedians was originally from India. And he came out in his Indian garb and he says, I know what you're all thinking is I'm Scottish. But then when he was speaking, he naturally said, oh, you're probably all thinking I work in customer service, and he started doing this whole routine about how answering phones and helping people with customer service and their problems and how we get these perceptions of people based on, their ethnicity. Oh, okay. Because he's Indian, he must be in customer service, sorts of things too. You just naturally perceive someone based on where they're from or their accent that they'll be a certain way, or that the fact that you're constantly being asked, that it must be so hard.
It is. It really is, because it immediately puts you in this oh, you're seeing me as different.
Yeah. I mean, the closest I can relate to that was, with all of my physical conditions. And as you know, I have, and I've used crutches a lot, canes a lot. At times I've even had to use wheelchairs, depending on where I am with surgeries, et cetera. And how sometimes just people will come up to me. I'll be in an elevator. Somebody will say, what's wrong with you? And that, just the fact that people feel like they can just ask you that, and that it's, and it's maybe I don't really want to share that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Just like the question of, why did you come here? I have no problem answering that question, but I know that many of the students I supported over the years and my coaching clients, many people come from trauma, very painful pasts, running away from a lot of pain, devastation, death. And it can be very intimate and intrusive to ask that question. Where did you come from? Do you go back to your country? Do you see your country? Do you see your family? And I know people who everybody in the family was killed. And to have to answer that, where are you from and why did you come here? Or what's wrong with you if you're in a wheelchair or crutches?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's very painful.
Yeah.
So,
and in a sense, it's also putting that person in that out group. too.
Exactly.
You're different than me.
Yes, exactly. I love this conversation because you are asking all of us to be more tolerant, be more open, to adjust to one another, and not to expect the non-native speaker to do all the work.
Right. And also, I was just going to say along with that is to be also for the non-native American speaker to accept themselves too, that it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to have an accent. It's great that you have an accent.
Yes, because we all do.
Right.
And you have your own particular unique
I have my general American English with probably a touch of a Boston accent.
Right. Beautiful. Well, for people who want to learn more about your work and want to explore accent modification coaching, where can they find you, Natalie?
Well, they can always go to my website, which is Natalie Cohen, SLP.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can always find me on Facebook as well. And also you can email me, which is at nc@nataliecohenslp.com. And I'd love to hear from you, whether it's just even wanting to share a thought with me is always wonderful too.
We will add all these links in the show notes, your website, your social media, your LinkedIn, your email, everything.
Okay, great.
I know what we usually say at the end of our, at the end of our sometimes very long phone calls. We could be talking to each other forever.
I know.
Yes.
Forever and ever. And it's too hard living so far apart from each other.
I know. But I love you so much. And I'm grateful that you said yes to contributing to the Language Alchemy podcast, to all the listeners. I'm very grateful, not only for this conversation, but for the work you do in the world and how you do it with so much compassion, so much love, so much tolerance and awareness. And so thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Natalie.
Thank you, Alejandra.
And for all our listeners around the world and in the United States, thank you for joining us. And remember that Language Alchemy is about transforming how we communicate. And that includes, as Natalie was inviting us, being open, being curious, and being willing to meet each other, not as an other, but just as a precious human being, just like us. And thank you so much for listening. Until next episode. And as we say in Argentina, ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Original music by Gary Lapo. We can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.